Hi class. I wanted to read a couple chapters of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to you and remind you where we left off. So it was just Charlie's birthday and he got a candy bar like he always does, and we were really hopeful that there was a golden ticket inside so that he could be one of the 5 lucky winners to go tour Willy Wonka's chocolate factory and get a lifetime supply of chocolate. And we learned that unfortunately there was no golden ticket in Charlie's candy bar, and we felt so sorry for him. And then as the last chapter went on, more and more of these tickets were being found around the world, all by unappreciative, kind of rotten kids. And there's only one ticket left. So chapter 9 is called Grandpa Joe Takes a Gamble. The next day, when Charlie came home from school and went in to see his grandparents, he found that only Grandpa Joe was awake. The other 3 were all snoring loudly. "Shh," whispered Grandpa Joe, and he beckoned Charlie to come closer. Charlie tiptoed over and stood beside the bed. The old man gave Charlie a sly grin, and he started rummaging around under his pillow with one hand. And when the hand came out again, there was an ancient leather purse clutched in the fingers. Under cover of the bedcloths, the old man opened the purse and tipped it upside down. Out fell a single silver 10-cent piece. "It's my secret hoard," he whispered. "The others don't know I've got it. And now you and I are going to have one more fling at finding that last ticket. How about it, eh? But you'll have to help me." "Are you sure you want to spend your money on that, Grandpa?" Charlie whispered. "Of course I'm sure," spluttered the old man excitedly. "Don't stand there arguing. I'm just as crazy as you are to find that ticket. Here, take the money and run down to the street, to the nearest store, and buy the first Wonka candy bar you see. Bring it straight back to me and we'll open it together." Charlie took the silver coin and slipped quickly out of the room. In 5 minutes he was back. "Have you got it?" whispered Grandpa Joe, his eyes shining with excitement. Charlie nodded and held out the bar of candy. "Wonka's Nutty Crunch Surprise," it said on the wrapper. "Good," the old man whispered, sitting up on the bed and rubbing his hands. "Now come over here and sit close to me, and we'll open it together. Are you ready?" "Yes," Charlie said, "I'm ready." "All right, you tear off the first bit." "No," Charlie said, "you paid for it. You do it all." The old man's fingers were trembling most terribly as they fumbled with the candy bar. "We don't have a hope, really," he whispered, giggling a bit. "You know we don't have a hope, don't you?" "Yes," Charlie said, "I know that." They looked at each other. Both started giggling nervously. "Mind you," said Grandpa Joe, "there is just that tiny chance that it might be the one. Don't you agree?" "Yes," Charlie said, "of course." "Why don't you open it, Grandpa?" "All in good time, my boy, all in good time." "Which end do you think I ought to open first?" "That corner, the one furthest from you. Just tear off a tiny bit, not quite enough for us to see anything." "Like that?" said the old man. "Yes, now a bit more." "You finish it," said Grandpa Joe. "I'm too nervous." "No, Grandpa, you must do it yourself." "Very well then, here it goes." He tore off the wrapper. They both stared at what lay underneath. It was a candy bar, nothing more. All at once, they both saw the funny side of the whole thing, and they burst into peals of laughter. Here's them laughing together. "What the heck is going on?" cried Grandma Josephine, waking up suddenly. "Nothing," said Grandpa Joe. "You go on back to sleep." So that was chapter 9. Chapter 10 is called The Family Begins to Starve. Over the next 2 weeks, the weather turned very cold. First came the snow. It began very suddenly one morning just as Charlie Bucket was getting dressed for school. Standing by the window, he saw the huge flakes drifting slowly down out of an icy sky that was the color of steel. By evening, it lay 4 feet deep around the tiny house, and Mr. Bucket had to dig a path from the front door to the road. After the snow, there came a freezing gale that blew for days and days without stopping. And oh, how bitter cold it was. Everything that Charlie touched seemed to be made of ice, and each time he stepped outside the door, the wind was like a knife on his cheek. Inside the house, Little jets of freezing air came rushing in through the sides of the windows and under the doors, and there was no place to escape them. The 4 old ones lay silent and huddled in their bed, trying to keep the cold out of their bones. The excitement over the golden ticket had long since been forgotten. Nobody in the family gave a thought now to anything except the 2 vital problems of trying to keep warm and trying to get enough to eat. There is something about very cold weather that gives one an enormous appetite. Most of us find ourselves beginning to crave rich, steaming stews and hot apple pies and all kinds of delicious, warming dishes. And because we are all a great deal luckier than we realize, we usually get what we want, or near enough. But Charlie Bucket never got what he wanted because his family couldn't afford it. And as the weather went on, he became ravenously and desperately hungry. Both bars of candy, the birthday one and the one Grandpa Joe had bought, had long since been nibbled away. And all he got now were those thin, cabbagey meals 3 times a day. Then all at once, the meals became even thinner. The reason for this was that the toothpaste factory, the place where Mr. Bucket worked, suddenly went bust and had to close down. Quickly, Mr. Bucket tried to get another job, but he had no luck. In the end, the only way in which he managed to earn a few pennies was by shoveling snow in the streets. But it wasn't enough to buy even a quarter of the food that 7 people needed. The situation became desperate. Breakfast was a single slice of bread for each person now, and lunch was maybe half a boiled potato. Slowly but surely, everybody in the house began to starve. And every day, little Charlie Bucket, trudging through the snow on his way to school, would have to pass Mr. Wonka's giant chocolate factory. And every day, as he came near it, he would lift his small pointed nose high in the air and sniff the wonderful sweet smell of melting chocolate. Sometimes he would stand motionless outside the gates for several minutes on end, taking deep, swallowing breaths, as though he were trying to eat the smell itself. "That child," said Grandpa Joe, poking his head up from under the blanket one icy morning, "that child has got to have more food. It doesn't matter about us, we're too old to bother with. But a growing boy, he can't go on like this. He's beginning to look like a skeleton." "What can one do?" murmured Grandma Josephine miserably. "He refuses to take any of ours. I hear his